Jeff, why don't we start with what three lessons did your mother or your father or a mentor basically teach you that you feel is still very relevant in today's
Sure,
increasingly digital world?
absolutely. I'll do one of each of those categories. One my mom, one my dad, and
Sounds
one my
good.
mentor, because
Yeah.
they're extremely long-term relevant. Um, my mother was very my mom was, I had a single mom most of my life. So my mother was very much all about, when you want something, work for it, right? When it's time to get something done, go do it. There's nobody that can stop you from getting what you want or need if you're willing to do the work yourself. So as a child, hearing that message from my mother all the time, my single mom, who sometimes worked 2 or 3 jobs um, to take care of her 4 kids, that was a great message right from the beginning. That's what I learned from mom. It's okay to want something, just go get it. I wanted later in a specific Ivy League education. I wanted to go to Yale, which we had no money in our family for. So I literally started my own business at 18 years old so I could work hard, make money, and go to the school I want, because that's the school I wanted. Instead of quitting because I had no money, my mom's lessons were, no, just work harder and find a way. So that advice from my mother about being willing to work for what you want in life was a really important and never left me. My father taught me, who I didn't really know till later in life as an adult, because they were divorced when I was a baby. My father taught me about relationship management, that you don't call on the people in your life all of a sudden when you're in trouble and you need something. You take care of your relationships your whole life, right? So my father is the reason I would sometimes call a board member, an investor, a customer, a friend, right? And just say, hey, you want to grab lunch tomorrow? And they would say, why? What's up? What do you need? And I would say, absolutely nothing. I just want to spend time with you, see how you're doing, say hello. So my father taught me the importance of managing relationships all the time, good times, bad times, and in between, not just when you need something. And then my mentor, his name was Roger. My mentor taught me about clarity of communication. That honestly, Jeff, this is what he said. Honestly, Jeff, if you can't explain what you want to say to people, what you need, what you mean in a sentence, then go back and work on it some more. Short, there's a very famous Mark Twain quote that I absolutely love. This isn't a letter Mark Twain wrote to a friend of his, a really long letter. And at the end, he wrote, P.S., I would have written you a much shorter letter if I'd only had the time. And I absolutely love that quote because being concise, brief and concise, takes work and takes thought. And my mentor would constantly say, Jeff, say that again in half the words. And he'd make me think and repeat my sentence with half the words. Then he'd say it again with even half of those words. So he taught me that simplicity and clarity are critically important in getting any message you want in the world to be heard.
How do you want to be remembered as a CEO and as a father?
Very, very interesting question right there. Because I've thought about that a lot. My best friend unfortunately drowned in a freak accident in the Irish Sea at 42 years old. And his funeral, losing my absolute best friend, really made me think about that a lot, because people at his funeral were remembering him for things that I'm telling you he would have never wanted to be. Those weren't the important things to him, the things to be remembered for. But I think for me, what I want to be remembered most for is I want people to be able to look back and say, my life was a little better because that guy was in it. I don't want to be judged by the number of deals I did or dollars I made. I want to be judged by the number of other people's lives I made better. And I did have an incident one time when I just been working and been gone a lot. And I was the chairman of an association of disabled sports for children, to get disabled children outside and playing on teams that never thought they could be involved. And I took my daughter with me once to basically push these children around in wheelchairs so they could play outside in a softball game. And in the middle of it, while all the kids were laughing and we were pushing wheelchairs through the grass and everybody was having a great time, and my daughter stopped and turned to me and said, "Is this why you work so hard?" I said, "It is." And she said, "Then keep doing it." And it absolutely brought me to tears at the time because she said, "If I can ever help, let me know." And so she made the relationship with, yes, I work harder than I wish I did. And yes, sometimes I'm gone more than other dads might be. But the relationship between hard work and success is an obvious one. And success is a platform that enables you to do things like buy wheelchairs for all these kids and run a sports league. And when she figured all that out that day, she said, "I get it now, and I appreciate what you do." That was extremely important to me because that's what I want her to remember. Not the days I worked late.
This is a question, Jeff, that I've asked every CEO, and I purposely ask it in every interview because I'm fascinated by the difference in everyone's response on it. So the word no is an incredibly powerful word in business. How does it work in your home, or is yes the opposite that works better for you?
Yes is the opposite. Nowadays, when you're talking to children and you're saying something, you're disagreeing, right? Instead of just saying no, right? There's this sort of new thing I wish I had known more, where you say yes and instead of yes but. When you say yes but, that means you're really negating everything before the yes. When you say yes and, right, then you're opening a discussion that I think is more collaborative. So I tended to focus always, as a parent, as a dad, more on the yes part. Instead of saying, "No, you can't do that," I would start with, "Why don't you do this instead? Why don't you consider this?" And if it was just a straight no, a good way to get to know is to say, "I want you to consider the impact of that and tell me what you think it is," right? And then when they realize, so that's not starting with no, that's starting with, "Let's have a discussion," which is more of a yes. Yes, we can talk about that. And I want you to come to the conclusion that that was a bad idea. Does that always work? No. There are times where children, remember, children hit hormones and puberty and rationality goes out the door. And sometimes you just say, "No, you're not going with those kids there tonight." It's just going to happen sometimes. But the yes and the explanation was always more powerful. I mean, by the way, that was my mom too. My mom wasn't a screamer, a yeller, a spanker, any of those things. My mother would say, "We sit down, we need to talk, and I want to explain to you why the choice you made was not a good choice." So it was always a discussion, never a screaming match. And I took that forward as a positive thing. Talk to them, make them understand. When you just say no and walk away, they did not learn why that was a no. So I always favored the yes in the discussion, even if it's a yes and.
I like it. It's slightly different, but I keep telling myself one day I'm going to write a book on, the power of no versus yes in business and home. And that's why I keep asking every CEO a great question like that.
All right, but I do have to say, no is extremely underused in business. I keep telling people that the scarcest word I work with startups and growth scale-ups. They need to learn to say no way more often. And parents need to as well. No is an important word, but I just like to try to get there in a positive and learning way instead of a no where the child doesn't understand what the no was about and what was wrong about it. That's what I meant. But it's still a firm no. I actually met somebody who said, "We don't use the word no in our house." And this is the true story. We were at another friend's house for a barbecue, and their child picked up a potted plant and threw it through a plate glass window. And the owners of the home we were at, the mom went nuts and said, "Aren't you going to say something to your child?" And this mother said, "No, we don't use the word no." And the mother said, okay, well, you can take you and your yes kids and get the hell out of my house. And everybody was just standing there. What do you mean you don't say no? So you allow your children to throw furniture through other people's windows? Because she said, we don't think no is a good way to raise kids. So that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's actually pushing it to the limit.
That's the most insane thing I'd ever seen.
CEOs in general are implemented of putting KPIs, year-end mission statements, and everything. Do you feel that as fathers that are shaping the next generations of our leaders, that in our household and in our family, we actually need to start setting as well KPIs and mission statements and values and where we want to be, just like we do within our companies?
My answer is yes. Children with goals design their own lives before they get to a point where they look back and say, I wish I'd done different things in high school, different things in college, different things along the way. So accountability is a really important thing for human beings to learn. And the younger that they learn, the earlier they learn that accountability is a good way to become an amazingly productive contributor to society, right? So putting something on the fridge that is in effect your children's KPIs and your children's mission statement is really important. It gives them direction and it lets them understand that having a goal, even if it's going to change, you may be headed towards one thing you think you're interested in life as a child. And as you get older or as you get there, you may say, wow, that wasn't for me. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian until the first time I saw them cut open a dog. Now, after all these years, I don't want to be a vet anymore. But the fact that you had a goal gave you a North Star as a young person to make choices that took you somewhere you want to go. So I think, yes, it is important to teach kids accountability and to let them create some KPIs of their own so that you, by the way, that way you can celebrate and reward them. Wow, it's amazing that you set this goal and you achieved it. I am so proud of you. And the result of achieving this goal has put you one step closer to something you said you wanted to do. So my answer is a firm yes.
But what about the father or the family itself? Does the father as well need to have his own KPIs on raising his children and how he's developing as a parent? Sorry, I'm adding that in, but is it actually good for the father rather than being the great businessman that he is at work and coming home and just winging it in general? How do you, just top of mind?
Yeah, yes, I think it's great to sit down and have a family meeting. I've certainly sat in those before and say, what is everybody's responsibility? How everybody gets a performance review? In fact, I do remember doing that with my daughter once in a really fun way because she asked about work because as a CEO, I was doing performance reviews all week. And she said, what are those? How do they work? How do you do them? And I explained it. And then one day I got an idea. I said, you want to do family performance annual reviews? And she was like, that'd be really fun. So we sat down and first that led to the discussion. What is our job description? What are each of us, and we made it fun. What are each of us supposed to do? What is the dad's role? What is the mom's role? If you're in a single parent family, just in general, what is a parent's role? What is the child's role? Responsibilities? What do we each feel like the other one is supposed to do? How are we doing on it? So yeah, we turned that into a really fun, and we made it like a corporate, right? Sat down at a table and we couldn't stop laughing and said, let's do a job performance review right now. But it was real in the sense that it opened the discussion of what do you think that I as a father should be doing that I'm not? What am I doing well? What a great question to ask your own kid. How am I doing? And asking them then, what do you think I should be doing, right? And how do we hold each other accountable? And what do we grade each other on? All very productive, positive steps to take.
You've run some really, really big companies. I've read your whole bio and everything. I've known about you, obviously. And you were saying earlier, that sometimes you were quite often you were away because this is what happens when you're in a leadership role and it can't be avoided. But did you develop either early or later, but do you have a work-life balance advice or tricks that everyone who seems to be looking for that magical silver bullet, as we call it, do you have any advice on how to at least better balance it in a way?
So, that balance thing is a huge myth, right? And the reason I say it's a myth is because
Thank you.
people think that I think the goal is perfection and it's never going to happen. You literally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually cannot have it all. Nobody can do everything right all the time. So the first step in that balance thing is stop holding yourself up to an unachievable standard. What you have to do instead is the best you can do, right? Which means that it's never quite stable. I one day was flying in a helicopter where the pilot literally said, here, you fly for a moment, and let go, and we almost flipped upside down. It pitched nose first, and he pulled it back out, and he said, here's the thing, difference between flying one of these and flying a fixed wing airplane. So the helicopter is at all times trying to spin wildly out of control. He said, so you use, whereas a plane is floating on the air. He said, you use all four limbs, left arm, left leg, right leg, at all times, constantly moving every direction just to keep things stable. That is what life is like, right? It's constantly looking for a chance to spin a little bit out of control. A child is sick, a parent is sick, there's a money problem, there's a work problem. Balance isn't this steady state that once you get there, you're good and it stays there. It's like an everyday thing and an every week thing, and it ebbs and flows. So I think the answer to balance is to constantly look at your gauges, right? I'm going to stick with that silly analogy, but look at your gauges and say, a little low on oil today, so I got to pay attention to that. And making sure that you're trying to find that balance for whatever is out of whack, and then communicating it well, right? When you have a time where you're not going to be home with the family, if you can explain, here's what I have to do, here's why I have to do it, here's why it's important, and here's when it'll be done, instead of just leaving and no one knows what's going on, because I certainly started there. And then the flip side of that is when you have a Saturday with the family and you say, let's go on a little trip, and you're not going to work, then don't work, right? And so I will end with a moment that was super important to me about balance, because again, I was spending a daddy-daughter afternoon at this time, and we were at a restaurant sitting down, and I started apologizing for having been working and gone a lot. And she said, can I tell you something? And I said, what? And she said, I have friends whose fathers work 9 to 5 and they're home every day of the week. And she said, and they have no relationship. They don't speak to their father. A couple of people I know are actually afraid of their father. And she said, you work a lot and you're gone a lot. And she said, but when you're here, it's like the greatest time ever. And she said, so if I have to choose, I'll take quality over quantity, because just being in the house does not make you a good father.
No,
and
exactly.
I was like, who on earth told you that? Because I don't know where she learned that, but it was really, really cool. She said, so if I have to choose, I wish you were around more, but if I have to choose, I'll take the quality of time we have together over just the quantity. It really made me think. So for people out there who are a busy dad, when you're gone and you have to be gone, it's not great. But when you're there, make sure that you are finding that quality time to do stuff with your children, that they really feel like you're present.
Yeah. I personally believe with the relationship with my daughter in general is that you can still, even when you're gone now with technology and everything, you can still be there in a virtual way. You can still be there knowing that they can count on you, they can call you, they can video with you immediately. Even if you're gone for 2 days, you're still, there's no excuse now not to be an absent father, in my view.
Totally agree with the technology like we're using right now.
You know, that then there's this whole part like being a helicopter parent or a helicopter dad, basically always making sure that, the kids are safe. The bubble wrap kids is what I call them in a way. Have you ever been in a situation or where you saw your kids were about to make a major mistake, but you held back because they needed to fail and they needed to understand how to bounce back on their own? Or do you believe in that not always coming to the rescue, but they have to learn the lesson so they can actually deal with adverse reactions in life and what's going to happen.
Yeah, so you just asked one of the hardest questions for all parents, right? Because your job from the time they're tiny is to catch them every time they're near the edge of the counter, right? Even when they're not about to fall, you run over there. And so that's the parental instinct. You're constantly protecting them and not letting them fall. But in answer to your question, I believe that if you never let your child fall, they will not know how to do it the first time you're not there. You will raise a helpless child who gets in a situation and says, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. My opinion, I don't think that's good. So picking and choosing the right situations, even though you can see that your child's probably going to fail, letting them, the reason I said the right situations, because sometimes things have serious consequences and you're like, no, I got to protect my child right here. But when you see the moment where the fall will be a lesson, but not an incredibly harmful moment in their life, let them fall, let them fail. They have to learn how to do that. And they have to learn that if mom or dad isn't there and I fall, unbelievably, it's okay. And I can get back up and shake myself off. If they don't know that, again, you're raising a child who will not be well equipped to face the world on their own. And that is our job, is not to catch our child every single time, but to prepare them to be able to deal with what life really brings. So you got to let them fail sometimes so they find out that they'll be okay afterwards. And they learn how to take care of themselves and not be a totally dependent child who can't function in the world.
Moving on from that subject, roughly, like segueing into, do you believe it's a good thing for a parent to be financially investing in their kid's business or kid's startup, you being a startup and angel investor, or should the kid go out there and actually earn it on their own while still being supported emotionally at home? Do you feel that they need to go out, they need to be rejected those 200 times by different so they can finally earn their own way? Or should a parent invest in their kid's startup?
Okay, I actually think both. I think that a parent can seed something. You can be the lead investor. You can be the first investor, and you can do a little. But supporting the whole business does not teaching your child anything. Yeah. Giving them a little bit, being an investor, whether you're the first investor, or you could say, I'll be your fifth investor. You got to get the first four, and then I'll help you out. So being one of the investors, I believe, is okay to support your child and show them. But then you got to act like one. You got to, and that's educational for them. You got to say, okay, why would I invest? Because you're my dad? No, not a good answer, right? Convince me like you would any other investor as what's your business idea and why should I support you? So it gives the child a chance in a friendly, safe environment to work on their pitch, to learn how to explain things to people and pitch them. So I think it's okay for you to invest, but I think you need to be a minority investor and just one on the list so that they learn, they can practice on you and you can say, that was pretty good, I think you're ready. And let them go out and try this process and discover the fact that rejection is totally survivable and it's just part of the process, right? They need to feel that. It's, again, a bad expectation to send a child in the world where every time they ever ask any adult anything, they were told yes. That child is not prepared to handle the world as compared to the kid who's not only can deal with rejection, but can shake it off because he already knows it's not fatal.
Absolutely. So moving on even more on that, can you give us a couple of tips that we should be teaching our kids about finance, money, life in general, so they actually have a better chance at succeeding in life? The reason why I ask you is I'm not the only one, but money and finance was never something that was discussed at the supper table in my house. And I had to figure this out by myself. And I wish, that I would have learned a little earlier because it would have saved me a lot of money or made me more money.
Yeah, so it is not well taught, and it is not taught at home or in school well enough. And it is important. And it's not just sometimes in schools, I've seen this. I go visit schools to talk to children literally all over the world. And so when I'm at schools, I talk about curriculum. And I do see that the ones that what they call financial management is literally balancing a checkbook, right? Which is all apps now. No one really does that anyway. But even so, they teach you, the assets and liabilities, right? And basically just both sides of balancing a checkbook. It's so basic, but it misses the most important thing, which is the value of money, right? And the time value of money, and the fact that everybody's time has some value to it, and every asset has some value to it. So I think it's really helpful when a child says, I'm going to make up an example. Well, you take me to the mall, and you say, sure, for $5. And they stare at you like, what? And then you explain to them, well, you are asking me for the use of my time, my vehicle, and my gas, that I get nothing out of it. And your child will say, what do you mean you get nothing out of it? What are you supposed to get out of it? And you say, well, I'm busy watching this football game. Why would I inconvenience myself? I don't want to go to the mall. You do. This is a real conversation that I had with my child during Sunday football, is why I'm saying this. And it's suddenly, she just stopped, and she's sitting there thinking and thinking. I said, when you ask other people for something from them or to do something for you, you are basically asking them for something that has value and offering nothing in return. That is literally, and it opened the conversation. I said, do you know that that's what money was created for? There wasn't money. And suddenly people need some kind of score system for what'd you do for me and what can I do for you? And we need some kind of little chips. I actually was telling her the original story of people that would do all the work. It's in a book called Science Since Babylon that I read. And I was telling her the story because it's kind of the invention of money. Somebody would go out and harvest corn, and then winter would come, so they'd have to bring it to the cave to protect it from the weather. But when they brought it to the cave and put all their corn in there, someone else that did no work and grew no corn would just eat it. So they came up with a system way back then where, based on the amount of corn you put in, that's how many of these round rocks I gave you. So that was representative of the amount of work you had, the amount of rocks you had. Hence, you were richer because you had a lot more rocks because you did more work. And when somebody else came in and said, can I have some of that corn? They said, give me a rock. And they said, I don't have a rock. And they said, then go out and do some work and get one of your own. Bring potatoes in, right? We'll give you a rock and you can use it to buy corn. I got a chance to explain all that to her because it gave me a chance to explain that everybody's time has value and every resource, driving a car or whatever. So the next time she came in, she said, if I agree to help you wash your car Sunday afternoon, will you take me to the mall Sunday morning? And then I was like, that seems like I didn't even make her do it. I said, that seems like a really respectful and fair offer. So yes, teaching the value of money is what they need to learn, not just the arithmetic of money.
That's fantastic. I like that. That's probably one of the better answers I think I've received on that. So thank you.
That was an important one for me.
It's a big one.
It is.
Why don't we jump a bit, with this whole pandemic and everything and it's going on. I don't want to harp too much on that. Do you feel that mom CEOs have a much harder time than dad CEOs, at balancing their work-life duties? And do you believe that with now the whole pandemic and fathers, showing up on social media and everything, do you feel that we're getting a little bit too much credit as dads for things that moms have been doing forever?
Yes. And not only do I think that, but think about this societally. Whoa, I used a big word. I don't usually do that.
That's a good one.
And I pronounced it. I just had to pronounce it slowly. This is just real, whether people like it or not. A father that is at the office all the time and works like crazy is respected as a driven, ambitious executive. If a mom did that, she would just be called a horrible mom who doesn't care about her kids. I have heard this, we all have many times. Yeah. The female CEO clearly chose her career over her kids. But if it's a man, the mom's expected to take care of the kids. This is the societal norm we inherited, not where we are today. And And that's normal, right? So it's perfectly acceptable for a dad. We respect a man that works his butt off to take care of his family. But if a mom dared to do that, she's just a bad mom that apparently chose money over kids. So women are already starting behind, and it's not fair. And so you are correct. A lot of things that men get lauded for, right, women get criticized for. I think it is not a level playing field yet, and we've got to get there. And breaking that societal norm, I have a friend who was a successful lawyer. His wife was also an attorney. And then they had 2 kids. And one day they had a conversation and they said, let's discuss between us. On the left side is how good of a parent we each are, being honest, who's good at this. Yeah. On the left side is also who loves being home with kids all day and doing school stuff. On the right side is who's the better lawyer, whose career is going better, who can support us better. They made a matrix. This is a kid I grew up with. And he called me one day and said, I'm quitting my practice. I said, what? He said, I'm going to be the stay-at-home parent. We want one parent to stay at home. Fortunately, we can afford not to both work, but we did this matrix and we both agreed that I'd be better off as a stay-at-home parent and she'd be better off in the office every day. So we're switching. And they're one of the happiest, most well-adjusted families that I know, because they didn't listen to that societal crap. They said, as a family unit, let's chart our skills, desires, everything, and let's just do what's best for the family. And that's what's best for the family. And when people give him a hard time, he laughs it off and says, I'm not here to make you happy. I'm here to create the best family I can create, and I'm doing that. So the people that say you quit your law practice, he said, yeah, I traded it for my parent practice. And that's the one that has the real long-term value to me. I think it was just a great example of the way they mapped it out and said, let's make the best family decision.
I think a really good example of what you're saying is, you might know, is Rick Moranis, the actor from, he did the same thing. He decided that he wanted to be there for his kids and not be, even though his career was at the top of its game with Ghostbusters and all that, he decided that he was going to be a stay-at-home dad and he was going to invest in his children. And he said it's the best decision he ever made. He walked away from Hollywood to be with the kids.
I know a number of people who have made that decision in many areas. Again, just saying overall as a family unit, what's best for us. All right.
What would be several tips, could be 1, could be 5, that you feel are key to being a successful dad CEO?
The first one obviously is communication, is understanding people. Oh, this is an important thing for me. What I'm about to say, I've learned this really the hard way. People always, all of us always underestimate the ability of children to understand, right? Things that we think are too complicated for them. You're a child, don't worry about it. It's adult stuff. You're wrong. They're actually absorbing it anyway. They're overhearing you anyway. They understood way more than you thought they understood, even if they didn't say a word. So we don't give our children enough credit to comprehend. If you sat down and said, here are the decisions we're making as a family, and here's why, and including a child as an equal vote at a family meeting, you get a completely different result than when you say, we're the parent, we'll tell you what we're doing. It's still ultimately your decision. You can veto it, but including children at the table during the discussion is super important. So I think that first tip is all about communication. The second one we touched on earlier, which I think is about the quality of time, right? When you're present, really be present. And planning to do that, even if you can't give the quantity, make sure that your quality is good. And then the other one would be, and we already talked about this as well, but I think it's really important, was kind of that scorecard piece, is actually asking. Just because the parent doesn't mean you're the parent, doesn't mean you know better, doesn't mean you know everything, and doesn't make you right all the time, right? Because I'm your mom and I told you so, or whatever. Parents have used that since the dawn of time. But guess what? It's actually okay to ask them as well. Say, do you think I'm doing a good job as a parent? what do I do that you like and what do that I do that you don't like? Most parents don't want to hear the answer, so they won't ask. You're still the parent. Ultimately, you're still going to make the decision. But it's so much easier, by the way, to accept a decision when you felt like you were heard in the first place.
Yeah.
When your children think they didn't get a chance to even speak and you didn't hear them, they're automatically a little more predisposed to be against whatever you're saying, not because they disagree with you, but because they feel unheard. So I think that's a piece of it as well. Give them more respect up front and give them a vote and a seat at the table and listen. You still will make the decision, but it'll be a totally different process if they're involved and their opinion is out there and they say, well, at least I got heard. Because that's a big thing later when you dig deeper. Children always say the same thing. My parents don't listen. I hear that all the time when I'm talking to kids away from their parents. They are fully convinced that you don't hear anything they say, yet they're supposed to listen to everything you say. And you're going to say, well, of course, Jeff, I'm the parent. That's not a good way to do it. The better way to do it is make them feel part of this process.
But isn't that a lot like at work as well? When you're the CEO, you have to listen to your employees and have a conversation with them as well. So it's kind of the same.
No, I agree. It's definitely a style thing. I was always a consensus management CEO. When I would ask employees, I had some people that worked for me for company after company. When I would ask people, when they said, want to work with you again, and I would say, why do you want to? That was the answer I heard most commonly, because you're a consensus manager. We actually feel heard. And I would tell them, I'm going to make the ultimate decision, and I'm asking you in exchange for me really listening to you, that when I do make a decision, accept it and let's all move on. Let's all say that's the decision and we're going with it. So doing the same thing at work as you do with children, saying, let's all talk about it, but everybody agrees once we've all been heard, when we make this decision, we can't go backwards. We all have to do our best going forward. I do that at work too.
The last question in terms of wrapping it up, this is a blank sheet, do you have any words of wisdom, tips, anything that you feel are very important to you that we didn't cover today, but you'd like to express?
Yeah, I think it's I'm going to phrase it this way, the take your child to work day. Was a brilliant idea, but you should do it on your own more often. But
isn't that what we have now? Isn't that 2020 is permanent? Take your kids to work.
Oh, that's actually funny. I hadn't even thought of that. Yes, that actually is pretty funny because they're there and they're listening more. But what I'm saying is let them. Instead of telling a child, that's a good example. And what I was going to tell you was the day in the early launch of Priceline, where my daughter wanted to know what we were launching. And I brought her into the office. She came in for the entire day one day and just sort of listened to and asked questions. What are you guys launching? What is this thing? How does it work? Why are you doing it? Why do you think it'll work? You could do that now. If your child really wanted to sit in on a Zoom meeting quietly and out of the camera, if you put a chair off to the side, why not invite them? They can say no, but allowing a child to come to work and listen to what you do really changes things a lot, because suddenly they say, wait, that's what you do? And then they start asking you questions, why? And then all of a sudden they feel part of it, not the sacrificial lamb. Because most of the time they feel like they're the thing that's being sacrificed so you can go to these meetings. But if you invited them to sit quietly and listen to a Zoom meeting and then you hung up and answered a bunch of questions, suddenly they feel more part of it. And I think it changes the dynamic a lot.
Jeff, thank you very much, for this meeting, for your openness. I know it took a while for us to connect, so I want to thank you also for your patience on my constant emails to you. But no, very, very good advice. I quite enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you again in the near future, if you don't mind.
All right, my friend, keep in touch.
This was fantastic, and good luck with everything from our previous conversation. Good luck with what's happening. So
thank you. And next time you're outdoors in beautiful Kiev, send me some pictures. I haven't been there.
Absolutely. You got that's a deal for you. All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.